Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Swimming Canada Facility Series. This is our third webinar, the COVID Return to Swimming. Today, we have teamed up with Sport Tourism Canada, as well as our partner, Myrtha, who has been presenting with us all along. The webinar today is going to discuss strategies of returning to the facilities, returning to the sports centers. We have a variety of different facilities on today, large to small, and we'll have a roundtable discussion. First, we'll go through the introductions, the background, our facility presentations, and then we'll take some questions and answers. Aujourd'hui, la présentation avec nos centres sportifs sera la plupart en anglais. Mais si vous avez des questions en français, s'il vous plaît, vous pouvez demander vos questions en français. Puis, on peut répondre des questions en français et aussi la documentation après la présentation sera disponible dans les deux langues. On va continuer aujourd'hui avec notre présentation et les introductions. Now we'll move forward to the introduction so we can get to our panel today. First of all, myself, I am Ahmed Alawadi. I'm the CEO of Swimming Canada, and it's with great pleasure to invite you here today. We have over 225 registered participants, and I see the list growing as I continue to talk here. We have Rick Traer, who is the CEO of Sport Tourism, and Jocelyn Jay, who is the events manager for Swimming Canada. I'd like to introduce Rick. I've known Rick for over 15 years. He is the CEO of the Sport Tourism Canada, formerly the Canadian Sport Tourism Association. We have worked closely with them over the years in various capacities. They are the gold standard. Rick has been with the organization since 2000, and they lead government relations, international relations. He works closely with the board of directors and implements the strategic plan. And they have been a great partner to not only all the national sports in Canada, but as well as municipalities, facilities, hosts, bidding organizations. They do a wonderful job. And Rick has been at the helm since the beginning, and I'm very pleased to have him with us here today. I'd also like to introduce Jocelyn Jay. Jocelyn Jay works for Swimming Canada. She is our national events manager. She also handles our international events and our international relations as it comes to events when they come to Canada. Her background spans over 40 years in swimming. She is a graduate of Ohio State University. She's a former swim coach at Northwestern University. She has worked and managed the Brantford Swim Club. She is a master official in swimming and is working with Swimming Canada and is our national events manager. Also, I'm very pleased to have Jocelyn as our host today. Next slide, please. So a little bit of background on Swimming Canada. Many of you are aware we are the national governing body for swimming here in Canada. We work very closely with our provincial sections, our swimming lessons partners, Red Cross Life Saving, YMCA. We have over 50,000 registered competitive swimmers. There are over 2 million participants annually in swimming lessons. And I can go on and keep reading the list, but hundreds of thousands of officials and master swimmers. We have grown our organization over the years. We service the national governing body in implementing Swimming Canada's strategic plan with all our stakeholders, as well as the Canadian Swim Coaches Association. So it's with great pleasure. I have already introduced Rick Traer, and I'm going to turn the presentation over to Rick. Thank you very much for attending today. Merci beaucoup.
Thanks very much, Ahmed, and it's our pleasure to be part of this session. Not only because of the critical role that aquatic facilities play in the recreational sport and high performance development systems, but also because of the important role these facilities play in their contribution to the visitor economy, particularly when hosting inter-community, provincial, national, and sometimes even international events, aquatic events. These events bring family, friends, and other spectators to host communities in support of the local economy and the event hosting supply chain that helps to ensure the sustainability of small businesses in communities across Canada while contributing to the domestic 6.8 billion sport tourism industry. Once again, we're thrilled to participate, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Over to you, Jocelyn.
Thanks, Rick and Ahmed. Welcome, everyone. First, I would like to introduce our presenters, starting with Rafael Torre from TPASC, or Toronto Pan Am Sports Center. Rafael is an experienced sports administrator with a demonstrated history of working in the sports industry, skilled in both for-profit and non-profit organizations, coaching, event management, team building, and community partnerships. Rafael has been the Director of Sports and Recreation at TPASC since its inception in 2014. Prior to TPASC, he worked at the YMCA in Greater Toronto in various management positions from 2010 to 2014, and he was also the Director of Coaching, Age Group, and Academy Coach at multiple soccer clubs and academies for 10 years prior. He holds a Master of Arts degree from the University of Oakland, where he was a two-time Mid-East soccer player. Welcome. On to Jeff. Jeff is our CEO from the Rest Hall Sports Center in Calgary. He was born in Toronto and raised in Winnipeg. He's been active his entire life, and through his lifelong involvement in sport, Jeff has encouraged to pursue a degree in physical activity and sports studies for the University of Winnipeg and recreation studies from the University of Manitoba, and a Haskayne MBA earned in 2005. Jeff's 20-year track record of leadership and management excellence was recognized in 2009 with his selection to Calgary's top 40 under 40, and again in 2014 with the Leaders of Tomorrow distinction. Before taking on the role at the Repsol Sports Center, Jeff acted as the Executive Director of the Calgary JCC for almost 9 years. Jeff's married to Lauren, and together they have 2 boys, Colby, who's 19, and Tyler is 14. In his spare time, Jeff enjoys biking, hiking, hanging out in the gym, and spending time with his family. Next, we have Annie Boutillier. She's the section head in culture and recreation of the city of Beaconsfield. She has 20 years experience in the field of athletics and more than 10 years managing aquatic programs and sport activities at the city of Beaconsfield. Her role and responsibilities include the maintenance and administration of the indoor aquatic facility and city playgrounds, green spaces. She holds a recreation degree from Dawson College in Montreal and is a CPRA certified playground inspector. Outside of work, Annie is an ultramarathoner and a mom of 2 energetic toddlers who keep her awake at night. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have Eric Hervailleux, who's the Director General of the Centre de la Culture et du Sport de Saint-Julie. Eric is a longtime volunteer of the Life Saving Society and has helped develop many programs in Quebec. He's been part of the Safety Standard Commission of the LSC for the last 3 years, and he's now the active commissioner of this committee. Eric has been implicated in the reopening of aquatic facilities, both in his province and nationally. Eric has been an aquatic manager for the last 15 years. In his day job, he's director of nonprofits specializing in operating sports infrastructures and operates 2 indoor pools and 5 outdoor pools located throughout Montreal. So I will now pass this on to Rafael to tell us a little bit more about what's going on at the Toronto Pan Am Sports Center.
Thank you, Jocelyn. very happy to be here and a pleasure to join the panel and to discuss about getting back to swimming. Before we start with the slides, I'll give you a bit of background on first the facility and kind of who we serve. So we are a legacy facility from the 2015 Pan Am Para-Pan Am Games. We are co-owned by the City of Toronto and the University of Toronto. They have created Toronto Pan Am Sports Centre Inc., who I am the Director of Sport Recreation for. We are a for-profit with a mandate of a cost recovery budget, which sits around somewhere about $17 million a year. So we are not officially part of the city or the university, which I'll explain later. Gives us a bit of advantage in certain ways to be able to move quickly. And we are a 312,000 square foot facility, so rather large. We have 3 pools, 4 courts, which constitute a field house, a walking running track, a climbing wall, studios, fitness center, offices, meeting rooms, and also we are the host facility for the Canadian Sport Institute of Ontario. Who we serve, multiple stakeholders in the building. Essentially, there are 4 City of Toronto community programs run through the center. So we are a City of Toronto Community Center. We are also the University of Toronto Scarborough Wellness Facility. So their athletics and recreation run out of our facility. We also have High Performance as a major stakeholder through the Legacy Agreement, and we house multiple NSO and PSO groups. And then we have the TPAS Inc. part of our business, which includes fitness center membership, league rentals, renters, which includes a large kind of roll call of aquatic clubs and non-aquatic clubs that rent through the facility. So it is a pretty busy building. We get 1.5 million visits a year. So large, and I think a good success story from the games in terms of the usage that we get in the community. A bit of a timeline. On March 14th, we closed. And at that moment, we kind of took care of our business on how to close and the things that we had to get in place for staffing and whatnot. But we shortly thereafter began our reopening plan. So it was kind of officially on April 13th that I sent out a distribution of key concepts to staff, and we started the process of creating a reopening plan. What we created was an 80-page document that we then used as a piece to prepare our staff for a reopening. So it was a rather expansive document. You'll see a photo on the slide here of a summary piece. Originally, we sent that 80-page document to Public Health for their kind of approval, recommendations, feedback. They certainly were on board with the protocols that we were going to have in place, and they also then asked us for a summary. The summary is going to play a big piece in terms of what we created a sport package with for our clubs and our high performance partners. But essentially, we were able to take that 80-page reopening document and create a smaller version, which was a little easier to digest. And again, we had their feedback, their kind of recommendations to kind of come up with our final document. From there, we created the sport package in preparation for a return to train or a return to sport of our partners. And we were able to initiate training for our first partner to get back in the building, which was Diving Canada, came in on June 15th. Swimming Canada came in on June 24th. And then aquatic clubs came in on June 29th. Currently in our building, we have a large list of clients: Swimming Canada, Diving Canada, Swim Ontario, Wheelchair Basketball Canada, Wheelchair Rugby, Judo Ontario, Toronto Dive Academy, and many aquatic clubs. So we have been fortunate to get back busy, but we've also been fortunate to come back staggered and in a safe way. So how did we get to being open? Jocelyn, if you can just go back one slide, I believe that would work. Perfect. So the first thing we did was we looked at the current public health mandates, the provincial framework, and city bylaws, which for us presents a bit of a good guide at times, and at times it presents some challenges and some decisions to be made. So for instance, the idea that in the provincial framework in the field house, you can participate in a team sport without wearing a mask and not physically distancing has provided a bit of a challenge, but we've been able to use public health mandates and use them as our minimum standard. And at times we go above that minimum standard to kind of put together our protocols. those mandates caused for physical modifications to the facility, and you'll see as we go through the slides some attached photos of some of the things we've done. And those modifications were then accompanied by a cleaning regimen and a hygiene regimen for staff and for participants. Next slide, please. We did in this photo, you'll see kind of this is, I believe, our north entrance. We inserted some protocols to heighten staff and participant safety. So when anyone walks towards the building, depending on what you want to use the building for, you have a designated entry area. So for high performance and for clubs, they come in through the north entrance. We have 2 entrances in effect and 2 exits in effect. So the screening that we have is a combination of hand sanitizing, it's a temperature check, it's also a screening of multiple questions that the user has to answer, and they have to do this every time. So screening certainly became a tool or a way to increase safety. We spent a large amount of money on PPE for staff and participants. We do have a mask policy throughout the facility, including when you are in the fitness center on deck of the pools, you have to wear a mask. Obviously, when you're swimming, there's no mask requirement, but we were able to secure a large shipment of multiple layers of PPE. And for instance, in first aid, it's a bit of a complicated, different environment where you now have to wear booties, masks, shields, et cetera, et cetera. And then part of this and flow and entrance exit kind of fall almost into the same piece. What we wanted to do was isolate and separate our users. So they were coming in a certain direction. They were coming in a certain way. They were given a flow to go through the building that includes floor markings, a agreed upon plan to get to their field of play. So with the idea being that we wouldn't have all the crisscrossing of different types of users. So Swimming Canada would not mix with the City of Toronto summer camp that's in play. And this gives people kind of not only the sense of security, but also, as you'll see in the sport packages, it's one of the requirements for clubs and for high performance to be able to get back to training, that they have a sense of isolation and that they're not crossing streams with other types of users. And then where it got a little complicated, and as we get busier, it gets more complicated, is through the program schedule. We're currently right now working on September 8th onward. But what we've attempted to do is have everyone not only have different entrances, but when you share an entrance and you share a kind of a path to get to your field of play, that you come in at staggered times. So you would not have, for instance, wheelchair basketball and Swimming Canada or Dive Canada or swim clubs be scheduled at the same time. And you have a 15-minute window where you would be able to access the facility previous and post to your scheduled booking. Next slide, please. Perfect. The original 80-page document was intended and grew from the original intention of being a staff training piece. So what we did is, when we created the document and kind of had everyone's approval to it, we did a virtual training online for all full-time and all part-time staff before they were able to come back in the building. After they could take the virtual training, we had the full-time staff come in, and we did an in-person on-site training where I facilitated the broader sport and recreation group that were delivering the programs. And then they went to their individual areas, one, to make sure that all the protocols that we had in place were present, and then to walk themselves through the processes. They then took that knowledge and then whittled it down to the part-time staff who also came in for a virtual training. It's really important at this point to kind of explain that when we first started the planning, we allowed all the full-time staff in the building to have a voice, and they certainly had a large role to play in the creation of the document. So they weren't seeing something for the first time or seeing something that they didn't have a voice in recommending or approving or kind of helping mold what it looked like. Next slide, please. So we got to the point where we were ready to open, and then we were able to open in a very controlled way with high performance. We worked with high performance partners to come up with what a sport return to play or return to train package would look like. And for high performance, it included the risk assessment tool, which was an OTP tool that was distributed to high performance sport, that they needed to have the green light on as part of their risk assessment. In their assessment tool, facility protocols played a big piece on getting that green light. So it was an important piece that was kind of almost simultaneously, they had to work together. If you were not the NSO and you were a PSO, you had to have the endorsement or an approved return plan that was endorsed by the NSO. We then needed a roster of athletes, coaches that included email, and this is going to be an important piece into our contact tracing, because what you'll need to access the facility, you have to download the app that we have for the facility, which then gives you a barcode, which then you have to check in and check out as you enter and exit the building. So we know exactly when you came in and when you left. And through all the protocols in place, we know exactly where you were in the facility. So if there were a case of COVID-19, we would be able to trace who came in contact with that individual. And then also importantly, not have to shut down in theory the entire facility, but be able to concentrate on a specific area. Next slide. The sport package also included a schedule of training. And then from our end, from TPASC, it included our TPASC summary, which needed to be signed off of by the executive director or the person with signing authority. And this signified that they understood the protocols that were in place for the facility. We then created a return to train protocol that was specific to that sport in that group, which outlined which parking lot you used, how you got into the building, where you were allowed to go, what resources you were allowed to use while you were here in the first stage. It included things like lane ratios, those types of things, so it was a very specific form that then had to be signed off on. And then lastly, waivers were created. We do have a specific COVID-19 waiver that we created. And then all our agreements coming up, we ensured that we had force majeure and pandemic clauses moving forward. On the right in this photo, you'll see one of the protocols that's actually being used for the community part of our pool, but it breaks down all of our lanes for lane swim, and it shows you how people will then check in, get a specific lane, and that'll be a way for us to control not only for contact tracing, but also our capacity, which we'll talk about a little later, and also allow for lane swim, older adults and weaker swimmers to have access to walls as opposed to the center of the pool. Next slide, please. For clubs, very similar packages. The risk assessment tool was not mandatory for some sports. So some sports will have it in, some sports will not. But everything else that you'll find in the high performance package is included in the club package, including approval by the PSO. We work for swimming, we work closely with Swimming Ontario. It was an interesting process where every club had to put in the documents to Swim Ontario for their approval and our approval as well. Until you had both approvals, you were not allowed back in the water. And as we kind of go through the stages of kind of our initial phase of training to trying to increase the ratios, at every moment in those stages, you then have to get reapproved by both the PSO and by the facility. So it's an important step. It was a lot of work, to be honest, a lot of work on both Swim Ontario's and on TPASC's end, but you line by line, word by word, have to go through all the packages and the approval sits in their file. Next, please. Again, the same thing with the rosters and the schedule, the way for us to control contact tracing and understanding how flow works. Next, please. Again, the summary, the training protocol, and the waivers. We have a lot of decent technology in our building because we're not that old. And a lot of the pieces that we have are online through apps. And then you'll see through the photos that we certainly utilized a lot of technology to help the protocols. Next, please. Lessons learned. And this is an interesting piece because this is an ongoing kind of everyday, you're learning new things. I will say that we're really proud of the work that we've done. we have been able to, and Jeff will be on here in a little bit later from the Repsol Center, we were able to collaborate with a lot of our facility partners throughout the country to put together plans, one, that we believed in, and two, that are working. But that being said, you certainly need to maintain a critical eye on the processes and be prepared to change. I'll give you a quick little example of a change that might sound minor, but in the end really helped. Is we had a staircase coming down for high performance that got them to the pool level. And then we had them going up the same staircase, and it was going to be monitored by green light, red light. In the end, it started to cause some jams. So we created a second exit that if they were leaving the facility full stop, they could exit separately. But if they were going back up to CSAO, they would use the 2-directional staircase. We implemented that probably about a week and a half in as we got busier, and it's worked out really well. We implemented our events team as ambassadors. This was huge because no matter how many signs you have, no matter how many screens you have, people will not read them. So to have physical bodies in essential key areas, it was really important for us to kind of customer service people. And we do have a customer service desk that's operational as well, but getting out in front of people, talking to people, have a nice day, hope you had a good swim, that kind of stuff was crucial. And also the making sure that the protocols that are in place are followed. The second part of the protocols is also that your staff follow the protocols as well. You can have all these wonderful things in place, but you can't get complacent. That critical eye piece needs to follow through from your managing director for us all the way down to a part-time lifeguard. The one believes in the protocols and then is willing to make sure that they're executed on a daily, hourly, by the minute basis. So that's been a bit of a challenge at times, just making sure that people aren't complacent. Next slide. And then the last piece, which for us, we've had a saying through this, it's easier to loosen than to tighten. So giving someone and then having to take it back. This has been a process for us where we've decided to go above and beyond what kind of are the minimum standards of public health and really put in the processes that we thought were the correct processes. We have the luxury of having some really, really good partners. Our high performance partners are fantastic. Our kind of clientele through the club circuit are also very loyal to the facility and certainly appreciate the facility. So they've been very good about having things in place that they might not have at other facilities, having to do things in a bit of a kind of more constricted way. But we found that this idea of create your plans to a certain level, and then as you go through your stages, you can ease back a little bit, as opposed to having to get tougher or to tighten your processes a little bit. So that's kind of, those are the lessons learned. And I don't know, Jocelyn, if this is the last slide. This is an interesting video that I'll show you. It's not that long. So we have two major swim clubs that we have multiple swim clubs that use a lot of time, but we have two swim clubs that use a lot of time between them, Nyack Swim Club and the Scarborough Swim Club. Working with them, we were able to create a video for aquatics that was meant to help clubs navigate the new protocols. It was really, really popular. It's interesting, it was a 15-year-old swimmer that did it on her iPhone, and it looked fantastic. We then kind of modeled this, and we've attached to every other part of the facility. So if you're a fitness center member, we created a video. So Jocelyn's gonna go through this right now. It should be up on your screen, and it outlines how you would get, can you just back that up a little bit, Jocelyn, if that's possible? Awesome. So what it did is all the protocols in place. It took them from the parking lot, physically distanced. It took them to where the screening station was going to be. There's actually music in the background to this. So it's quite simple. There's not a lot of narration, and it walks them through all the different parts. There's the temperature check, and it takes them down to through their field of play. We do have a security staff that's always on site. We've kind of repurposed them to do the screening, and then we have a couple of security guards that continue to walk around. But you can see some of the protocols. There's the staircases that gets you down that are one directional. Takes you onto the deck. Each athlete picks up a bin. They'll have a location on the bleachers where they have to change. They need to come swim ready. They don't access showers. They need to come showered as well. They'll change, masks come off at the end, and then they're able to get into the water. And then it's the reverse on the way back. The patterns, we started off with utilizing double lane ratios. So we started at 4 per double lane, and then we moved to 6. Some of the clubs are not there yet, but they have the option to go up to 6 if so. And you'll see that they need to be swimming on the black line, and then they would return through the adjacent lane. So we're not multiple swimmers in each lane. So when they finish training, they have to exit at a certain end. The swimmers that were on the far end will in turn exit by bringing their stuff back, and then they'll go through the exit process, which is just the reverse of the entry process. So that should get them in safely. There is no loitering, no meeting, no deck training, no kind of hanging out in the building, and they do disinfect, and then there's an exit. So thank you, Jocelyn. And I will throw it back to you.
Thank you, Raphael. And also too, it's Erin that's doing all the behind the scenes, just to give her some credit. Okay. So thank you for that. Also just wanted to let everybody know that if you do have questions, please put them in the chat, and we will certainly get to those once everyone's presented, so that we can get everyone's opinions on that if it does apply. So on to our next presenter, Jeff.
Thank you. Thanks to Swim Canada, and thanks to Myrtha Pools for inviting me to participate. And I see there's 127 participants in the webinar, so thank you for taking the time today. Well done, Raf, and watching and listening to Raf go through this. I think what you'll find is that both facilities acted quite similarly. And while there might be some overlap in our presentation, I think what you'll see is I'm going to take a slightly more philosophical view as to how Repsol Sports Center responded to the pandemic, how we found our way through the pandemic, and how we returned our sport partners and our public members. I'll touch on some of the tactical steps that we took as well, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. So if we go to the next slide, just a brief agenda. And I'll start by just introducing myself. So thanks to Jocelyn for reading out my bio. I appreciate that. You're welcome to go to the next slide. And so this really isn't about me, but I think just sharing a little bit about my background might help set and provide some context to Tone from the Top and the strategy we took as a facility to return our members and our sport partners. So as you heard, I have a background in recreation, sport, and business. Coupled with that is very strong business ethics, and believe very much in things like fairness and equity, in finding opportunities, in running the facility with a philosophy whereby we look to say yes, being creative and innovative to find win-win solutions. And I tell you that and a few other things that will come in the following slides, again, just to set a context and a framework for what helped us in our decision-making process. So if I could have you turn to the next slide, please. A little bit about Repsol Sports Center. I appreciate that likely many of you have been in our facility or familiar with it. But to add some color, the facility was built in 1983 for the Western Canada Summer Games. It is a legacy facility of those games. It operates on a dual mandate that I'll talk about in a minute. But I do want to highlight our mission and vision. And I do this because I think it also helps set an important context for the facility and how we operate. I have worked for facilities and for other organizations, I suspect many of you on the call have as well, where you have a mission and a vision and they sit on a shelf. In our facility, we talk about them often. They form performance goals, they form work plans, and they help set the framework for how we operate. I love both of these. I think about our vision statement and the powerful words that are contained within the statement. Words like innovation and expertise and passion, goals and dreams, and emphasis on individuals and teams, on sport and on public. And I really like our mission statement. I find that it is short, succinct, and it's powerful, and it tells you what we do and why. And so again, a little bit of backstory to help set the context for how we navigated our way through COVID-19. Next slide, please. So for us, our values are critical. I'm going to talk about how these values helped us make decisions when making decisions was challenging, sometimes seemed impossible, but we had to start somewhere. Our values at Repsol Sports Center are safety, legendary service, excellence, and innovation. I think our job and my job as a leadership team is to not necessarily prioritize these, but to understand how we can deliver all. So how we can deliver a safe facility while at the same time being innovative or delivering excellence in service. So the importance again is not choosing one or the other, but being creative and delivering on all. Next slide, please. So I mentioned a minute ago that the center runs on a dual mandate. I think many centers run on dual mandates. We are quite overt about ours, and that is to support equally individuals competing along the long-term athlete development model, including high performance, and to support those groups equally with citizens of Calgary who are in pursuit of their own individual recreation needs. Many facilities support one over the other. They might be more focused on sport, others are more focused on public. Repsol Sports Center is truly balancing these two groups. And I think what makes it even more unique is the attitude and the culture of this facility is not simply to take the resources and divide them up. It is to understand how we can recognize the needs of these two stakeholder groups and then overachieve when it comes to delivery. We don't always, but it's certainly our goal. Next slide, please. So enter COVID, and now keep in mind my background, the facility background, mission, vision, values. So at a time where I would say there was confusion, uncertainty, a lack of predictability, complications around decision making, we decided that we would ground those in things that matter. So for us, it was recognizing that we are not experts in infectious disease. We are experts in facility operations, in sport, in public rec. So we took directions from the chief medical officer. That helped us to articulate how we were making decisions to our stakeholder groups. Through that, we stayed true to our mission, vision, and values. We also allowed ourselves, and I think Raph alluded to this, to implement directions at a moment's notice. I don't like to use the word pivot because I think it's overused, but we were agile and ready to shift. We also made a point of constant communication with our stakeholders, with our staff, with our board, with our customers. We knew many of them were facing the same stress, the same uncertainty. Many of them had the same questions. So rather than compartmentalizing our operations, we reached out and we made a point of making connections, if for no other reason other than to just check in. We also really leveraged our peer network, and we talked to groups across the country like TPASC and others, and we worked through these complex situations as a group. As a side note, and many of you will realize this and experience this in your day-to-day life and in your work life, it's incredible to work in an industry that should be competitive, but rather you often find cooperation. And I think this was a great example of how facilities came together with PSOs and NSOs and other organizations to say, how do we get through this together? Next slide, please. So our immediate actions upon our closure short-term was concerns about employees and our customers. What are they facing? What are they feeling? How can we support them? We of course had concerns about revenue loss and events cancellation. So as a leader of Repsol Sports Center, I suggest that my responsibility amongst many, many things, but primarily is to run the facility as a business, but to understand the business that we're in. And those two things really complement each other and helped in this scenario. We're also worried about facility security. For those of you that know the building, it sits inside a big park. It's quite exposed, and as there were fewer people in the building, we were worried about the security of the building. Long term, we started to pay attention about, will people return? What will be the future of our partners? How will we ramp up? And so that leads to the next slide, please, which was really about our philosophy, not the tactics, but the philosophy about managing during a pandemic. We purposefully and intentionally work to support employees, customers, and our sport partners. We stayed connected and tried to be ultra responsive. We tried to control what we had, and we tried to prepare ourselves in the months that we were closed to come out of it better and to come out with a plan. The next slide, please. So Alberta had an interesting reopening plan, and a good reopening plan that was based on 3 phases. Recreation and sport was in the 3rd phase, which still has not been realized in our province. But as the pandemic was shifting and as decisions were being made, recreation and sport got notice that they moved into phase 2. And so that was exciting for us, but also stressful because it came quickly and it came earlier than we thought. And again, we had to react and we had to be ready to shift. So for us, we really focused on what got us here. So it was a reminder about direction from the CMO, working with our partners, staying true to our mission, vision, values, supporting the dual mandate. We talked about being ready to shift. I'm going to pause here for a minute and spend a little bit more time on play to our strengths. What we saw in Alberta and in Calgary was that a number of facilities opened slowly, and they opened in the areas that they had the greatest strength and the area they thought they could be most successful. So tying a lot of what I've shared with you so far together, for us, it was everything. And I don't say that flippantly. It was really an understanding that if we truly treat both groups, public and sport, equally, we have to find a way to do so. And so for us, those were our strengths. We chose not to run a series of programs. We chose not to run summer camp. We chose really to focus on public access and sport access. And then through that, our plans were developed. I want to talk again about the importance of partnership. We were supported greatly by Swim Alberta, by Swim Canada, by other organizations in Calgary that helped us navigate through this. And so flipping slides here, I'll get a bit into some of the details that I think are important and that Raf shared. Like Raf, we developed a playbook. It was really our guidebook that told both our employees and our customers what to expect when they would arrive at the facility and how we could work together. And we said throughout that this is really a two-way street, that we can't do it alone. If we don't get the support from our customers, if they don't respect equally the requirements of the Chief Medical Officer and Alberta Health, this won't work. So we prepared a code of conduct, and in that code of conduct, we said, this is our promise to you, and we said, this is your promise to us. And we held both groups accountable. Critical to our success was decoupling of individuals and sport groups. Much like Raphael and TPAS, we are blessed by size. At one point that was seen as a criticism. How will you clean and prepare a space of this size? And for us, that really became the opportunity. Our sport clubs do not come through our main entrance. They do not check in through our main gate, and they do not have contact with any other person in the facility other than their own group. So that's really been a blessing for us. I shared with Cheryl Humphreys, who I see is on this and the head of Swim Alberta, that in fact, I think, and you can't share this outside of this call, all 129 people that are on it, I think it was actually much easier for us to manage groups than individuals. And that might sound crazy, but let me explain why. Individuals arrive at unpredictable times. They do unpredictable things, and they touch a multitude of things. We don't know when they're coming, we don't know when they're leaving, and we don't know what they're going to do in the facility. Now, in saying that, I want to give you confidence that we've managed all of those things. but sport groups have been extraordinarily easy. We know when they're coming. We know when they're leaving. We know who's coming. We also have the support of the clubs and the PSO who have their own plans layered on our plan that creates an added level of discipline. So for those of you that might be on the call that are looking to return sport, I would say there's lots of opportunity and it can be done quite safely, and offline I'm happy to take those calls, or later on in this call I'm happy to take that call. So just whipping through the bullets and being respectful of time, we created plans for athletes, coaches, administrative staff, and parents. We took advantage of the facility size. You guys can read this. We really zoned each area of the building as an independent standalone facility. That was our strategy. At first, what seemed daunting became much more manageable when we considered that there's a multitude of things we have to do, but ultimately, at the front of that was, can you do a health declaration daily? Can you actively screen participants, not just passively screen them? Can you provide physical distancing? Can you contact trace? And can you clean? And those became cornerstones for us as a go, no-go decision. If we could do those things, it was a go. We layered complementary plans on top of each other, and then we developed pre and post training expectations. Next slide, I'll be really quick here. For those of you that are familiar with our facility, this is a two-dimensional blueprint that just shows traffic flow, so you can see that taking advantage of size, using access and egress doors that go immediately out of the building to create that opportunity that there's no cross between public and sport, and frankly, no cross between one sport club and another, using different entries and exit points. That's helped us immensely. And the next one is just of our gym. You can move to that, which is only relevant in that some of our teams are doing some dryland training, and we certainly still support dryland sport partners. And so I think with that, I will say thank you and put it over to the next presenter.
Thanks, Jeff. I also want to say, as we're leading up to 1 o'clock, if anyone does need to leave early, this is being recorded and will be sent out to all our attendees along with a survey. It will also be posted on our website under resources and facilities. So that is available if you do need to leave early. On to Annie from Beaconsfield, please.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Bon, bonjour à tous. Bonjour à tous. Moi, c'est Annie Boutillier. Je viens de la ville de Beaconsfield. Attendez une minute, je ne vois pas vraiment sur mon écran. Donc, ça ne sera pas bien long. Ça ne sera pas bien long. Donc, oui, c'est ça. Est-ce que vous me voyez? Bon, parfait. Désolée, ma caméra ne fonctionnait pas. Donc, bonjour à tous. Hello, everybody. And thank you for Swimming Canada for letting us be part of this. I won't be going into very specific details about our procedures, mais si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez surtout pas. Donc, let me start by introducing our facility. Located in Beaconsfield, Quebec, the Recreation Center was built in 1974 and includes a full-size arena, an 8-lane, 25-meter pool, a gymnasium, and multi-purpose rooms. Our pool is home to 3 clubs, so the Beaconsfield Bluefins, the Beaconsfield Synchro, and Tiburon Water Polo. On March 12th, the OMS declared the global outbreak to be a pandemic, and the very next day, all of Beaconsfield municipal facilities offering services to the public, such as the library and the recreation center, were closed. By March 16th, most employees were already working from home. Within a few days, our basin was already emptied, and the idea was to go ahead with our annual maintenance plan. Although we didn't know for sure, we had a feeling Quebec's 2-week pause could be a little longer. Unfortunately, what we did not foresee was the construction sector to also be shut down. So this left us with an empty basin and a lot of unfinished work. The months of April and May came quite quickly. They came and went quite quickly. During that time, we were reaching out to colleagues from other municipalities such as Pointe Claire to exchange ideas, discuss various scenarios. I've never spent more hours than on the phone with Claude Picard, the Bluefin's head coach, to pick his brain, to see what he was planning. I even reached out to Ahmed from Swimming Canada to see what they had planned. From what I gather, we all had the same questions. We were looking for support and solutions, and these exchanges really made me so much more appreciative of the swimming community. It really felt like we were all in this together. So the return to school, constantly being pushed back in Quebec, we realized that the real back to school would be on grass or in the water. And we really needed to get that done properly. So for this to happen, we had to start planning the training of our aquatic teams. So past habits such as sharing equipment or even a pen had to be completely reviewed. And they were off the table now. So basic first aid had to be reviewed, adapted, disinfection protocols, cleaning regimens, and of the entire center had to be put into place. So while we focused on that ever-evolving plan, our communication service was busy designing signage for each municipal building and some more specific to the pool, for which we received advice from the Life Saving Society. Our pool's reopening plan was simple. We would open in 3 phases. The phase 1 would be for our municipal day camp, participants only. Doing this would allow for us to test out our approach and address any kinks or without having the public eye there. Phase 2, for which we had planned to start 2 weeks later, came quite quickly due to our heat waves. But we would have never opened up if the lifeguarding team felt uncomfortable. Their voice was an important piece of all of these phases. And phase 3 is the return to indoor swimming by our associations, which is starting next week. Finally, we were able to start implementing aquatic staff trainings and hosting national lifeguard recalls. Of course, when the government announcement was made, we did not have water in our basin yet, but thankfully we were able to host these outdoor recalls at Beaurepaire Pool in Beaconsfield. So basically, April and May were spent going over scenarios, finalizing communication plan, preparing our opening phases, preparing staff trainings, ordering equipment. So that included PPE, aquatic trainings, and medical equipment, stickers of all shapes and sizes, finalizing our annual maintenance, rehiring employees, implementing staff trainings, and fine-tuning our facility schedules, security, and procedures. And as I said, now the slide is on June, we did our recalls. So that was part of the plan. So to give you an overview of our timeline, I think it's the next slide. On July 9th, we opened the pool for the day camp participants. July 12th, we opened the pool to public for heat waves. July 15th, we finally opened up the entire center, both for skating and swimming activities. And on July 22nd, the Life Saving Society performed a pool COVID-19 audit to ensure that all the boxes were ticked. So now we're in August, 6 months into the pandemic, and we're continuing our meetings with associations. We're reviewing our procedures and going ahead with the fall programming, which includes swimming lessons, aquatic courses, and back to sport from our associations. Next slide. So the best practices in our at our facility right now was establishing early on a maximum capacity for activities. We wanted coherence between the skating rink and the pool, not to create any confusion. Communicating frequently with our associations and colleagues, even if it's to just ask how they're doing. This was especially important to keep spirits alive. Involving the staff in the decision-making process, I want to speak more specifically to the aquatic staff. For those of you who have ever come to the Recreation Center in Beaconsfield, we have very little offices, especially the aquatic one, and it was impossible to fit anybody in there. So they had suggested to create them a deck office, and we did. So we built them an office on deck. It's nothing fancy, but it's at least a place that they can put their PPE down and their bags down without having to worry. Another thing that worked well was limiting the number of spectators. And actually, at the moment, there's no spectators allowed, whether you're on the rink or at the pool, but that will change just after Labor Day, after the swim clubs are starting to come back and with the reintroduction of swimming lessons. Ordering PPE equipment early removed a lot of the worry. We're lucky to have a purchasing department in Beaconsfield, and they took care of all of this and early on. So at the end of March, everything had already been received in the building. Starting small and growing as we go. It's a lot easier to add and remove. I know some of the past presenters just mentioned the same thing, and we plan on going slow for the next 2 years. And then last but not least, it's limiting the access to locker rooms, both at the pool and the arena. That too will change just after Labor Day, as we will allow access to locker rooms for a quick change. However, showers are going to remain closed for the time being to avoid any lingering. And the next slide. So lessons that we've learned so far, we have to be for us anyways, we have to be specific about what changing in a public space means. Right now, we ask everybody that comes to the pool to come already dressed in their bathing suits. And I'm sure most swimmers and athletes can probably perform a deck change flawlessly, but that's not always the case for other generations. So despite asking swimmers to arrive or already in their bathing suits, we had a few issues. The SERB, I didn't expect having to rearrange entire schedules in order to keep employees working a minimum of hours so they can stay on the SERB. It was quite frustrating, but in the end, those who decided to stay home turned out to be my backup plan. So they would come in to replace our guards as needed. Practice at other municipalities may not be similar to yours, and that can cause issues. So, for example, a parent that's driving from arena to arena cannot always remember, okay, at Beaconsfield, we're not allowed spectators. At Point Claire, we're allowed. We had to be consistent with other municipalities, and this is really what we're trying to do. To finish, we really don't have the perfect solution, but we're very proud of the work that we've accomplished here in Beaconsfield, and we are happy that these webinars are happening so we can learn some more. Thank you.
Thanks, Annie. And finally, Eric.
Thank you. I'm gonna jump right in, seeing the time going by. For my part, I'm operating 2 indoors pool and 5 outdoor pool. Today, I want to share with you some of the tips and the things that we put in place. And I also want to share the work that I've been doing as a volunteer with the Quebec Association of Aquatic Managers. We've been organizing some polls, and I'm going to share the results with you. Those information I think can be interesting to know how other aquatic facilities are organizing themselves with the reopening plans. So quickly on our part, we have been keeping our indoors pool closed for the summer. We actually have more hours open outside, and we just started back our activities inside this Monday. Thank you. So here I'll do a first poll and I'm sharing with you. So the way they're going to work, I'm going to be sharing with you the result. Every time there are about 50 to 60 attendees that answered those polls were made 2 weeks ago. So you can see at the top of the chart the number of persons that answered. So the first question that we ask our members, aquatic managers, is what will you be offering this fall? So as you can see, most of them are preparing to offer the full programs. So we have lane swimming, swimming lessons, and aqua fitness that will be offered. Some of them have decided not to offer some aspect of the programmation, but mostly everything's going to be offered throughout our Quebec aquatic facilities. On the next chart, The question that we ask our member is, how are they going to be managing the fall session? So 40% of our members that answered the poll have shared with us that they will be keeping pretty much the same schedule as usual. About 1/3 are going to have a shorter swimming lessons, so probably less weeks. The same for aquatic fitness. About 40% of our members have decided to delay the beginning of the session. This is probably to allow our patrons to be confident with the safety of returning to the aquatic facilities. Most of the information that we are getting is that those that are delaying are waiting that school start again, and that parents and children can see how things are going at school before deciding if they're going to be registering to aquatic lessons. For those that were organizing 2 sessions during the fall, we have 14% of them that told us that they will only organize 1. So they are canceling 1 of the 2 to give them more time to delay the beginning of the session, to have a few weeks available if they need to cancel if there's a second wave or if for any other reason. But on the contrary, we've been learning in the last week that some of our aquatic managers are organizing a second session when they usually did not do so. So they're organizing really small session from about 4 to 6 weeks long. So they can start slowly, have a few patrons come in the facility, and that they can share the good word about how things are going smoothly and are doing well. Usually those are more for aquatic fitness when they're organizing smaller sessions. And there were one aquatic facility that decided not to reopen this fall, and that will be waiting for next winter. Next slide, please. So I have a last one that I'm going to be sharing with you for now that is not on the screen because this one we did today. We asked our members this morning if they were going to change the cost of entry for lessons or for free swimming. So the answers we got, 45% of our members said that they would be keeping the same prices as they used to. 22% of our members said they would be keeping the same pricing, but they will be reducing either the weeks or the minute, the duration of their lessons. We have 14% of our members that said that they were going to offer the programmation with a higher cost, and 20% are still thinking about it. So in our case, we will be canceling one of our 2 sessions. We decided to start registration a week after the return to school, as I said before, to give a chance to parents and children to be confident in the return to sport. And we will be starting our swimming lesson on the 3rd week of September. Another question that we ask our members is, will you be allowing the use of changing room this fall? So 3/4 of them told us yes, that they would. 9% told us that they would allow the use of changing room, but only when exiting the pool. So the patrons would be asked to be ready to have taken a shower before, since they will not be going through the change room. And a few haven't decided yet when we asked the question 2 weeks ago. So for those that are not allowing the use of change room, we understand that the patrons will be leaving their bags on the deck pool. The other question that we asked was specifically about showers. So 40% will allow the use of showers. 12% will not allow the use of showers in the change room because they have showers on deck, and those will be available. 7% will allow the use of showers only while exiting. 17% will not allow the use of showers, and about a quarter are still deciding. Here in Quebec, our health authorities recommend that the showers be still mandatory. So either the managers will ask the patron to have a shower before they come to the facility, or they will need to adapt their pool deck and add some showers on deck. Next slide. Thank you. In our facility, PPEs are mandatory for patrons, except while they're taking shower and when they're entering the water. So that means that they do have to keep it while they're walking on deck until they're really ready to go into the water. For our lifeguards, PPEs are mandatory in Quebec when they're doing an intervention or when physical distancing can be maintained. So when they're on the chair, they will not have PPEs. So I'm talking about a surgical mask and eye protection with glasses. Most of our aquatic facilities have adjusted the work plan so we can maintain the physical distancing, but in some aquatic facility, lifeguards need to have PPEs while they are lifeguarding on deck. In our facility, we had to review our change room capacity. We have 3 change rooms. We are only going to be using 2 because one is too small. We have a maximum capacity of about 25 to 30 patrons per change rooms. We are making our change room universal in one of the 2 facilities that we have, because in that one we had some problem with flow circulation. So people are going to be arriving on deck, on the pool deck, and will be exiting through the change room. So the first group will be using the first change room, and the second group will be using the second change room, because the first group will probably not have leave the change room yet. Patrons will have 15 minutes in the change room, and then they're going to be asked to leave. Also, we have staggered the start time of swimming lessons, so all the patrons doesn't come and leave at the same time. So we put in some adaptation for our lane swimming. Registration is mandatory. We have been refunding many patrons because they do not feel that they will be able to use their membership as easily as they used before. Since there's a registration that is mandatory, places are limited. So that was an issue for us. For the swimming lessons, we also have been revising our bather loads for those lessons. In the aqua fitness, we only have 22 patrons that are allowed at the same time. Usually we were up to 30 patrons. For younger lessons, parents will need to be into the water. So we're going to have 2 instructors outside of the water wearing PPEs, and they will be doing demonstration on each other so the parents can then teach and correct their children. Courses length and time will be the same in minutes, but the session will be longer, sorry. We were used to do 8-week sessions, and now it's going to be 10 weeks in them. Another adaptation that was made from one of our members during free swimming, they asked their lifeguard to whistle the patrons that are too close to elderly users. That being done, they were able to have those users be more confident in the safety of using the aquatic facility, and they already saw an increase in users, because they're going back at home telling their friends that it's safe and there are things that are being done for them. So maybe this is another tip that you could consider for your aquatic facility. In Quebec, about competition, we are now allowed to have 250 spectators in our indoor facility. If they maintain a 1.5 meter distancing, they need to wear a mask. And if we are using the 2 meter distancing rule, then they can take off the mask while they are inside and sitting. A last poll that I'm sharing with you, we ask our members if they were allowed to do so, would they agree to hold a competition in their indoor facility? So 11% told us yes, that they would. 20% told us yes, but not before January. So they want to leave the fall go through if there's a second wave to see how things are going to go. About 80% told us that they will not allow to hold a competition in the near future. And half of our members that answered the poll haven't decided yet what they would be doing about that. So our lesson learned, here in Quebec, we did not have any outbreak in our aquatic facility that I know of. The one that we know were coming from staff, so staff that were doing parties or initiation. So they were not necessarily contamination to the patrons, but enough contamination to staff that they need to be closed because they didn't have any more lifeguards that could be on duty. The other thing that we hear is that we need to put in place safety measures, but we also need to promote them so that our patrons feel that it's safe to resume aquatic activities. Right now, most of our aquatic facility haven't started the registration for the fall season, so we don't have any data yet about how popular they're going to be and how many children are going to come back to follow their lessons. On the next slide, staff training. Also, we've been doing webinars, videos. The Life Saving have organized here in Quebec webinars that were mandatory for all lifeguards. So they were between 6,000 to 8,000 lifeguards that followed those before we started the summer season, and others are being prepared before the fall season. Our Quebec Association of Aquatic Managers have been organizing 2 to 3 meetings with their partners, the Life Saving, Red Cross, and all the sports federation. Those meetings were really helpful to make sure that we all have the same position and guidelines that were given throughout. Since mid-June, the association have been organizing with their members weekly webinars too, to share ideas and experiences. So those were really helpful. A tip that I can give you, if you're one of those aquatic manager and you feel that you're alone or you're working in a smaller facility, do not hesitate to reach out. Don't stay alone in your corner. It's easier to do some brainstorming with other managers, and you'll find easily ideas and tips to put in place in your facility and ensure a safe return in your aquatic facility. So thank you, and I hope those information are going to be useful to you.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you to all our presenters for giving us so much great information. I see that there's a lot of questions in the chat and some answers coming from presenters and many of you as well on things that have worked and things you're thinking about. So thank you for that. This is just some contact information for our presenters and our additional attendees and support for this webinar today. So if you do have any questions specifically for a presenter, please go ahead and email them directly. We do have a few questions, but we're not likely to get to all of them. So please keep posing your questions in the chat. Keep answering questions as you as you see them. If there are some in there and they're not answered, and we will send them out in addition to the link with the survey. So just for, I guess, any of our presenters, has your facility had any cases of COVID-19? And if so, how did the managing of the contact tracing go?
I'll go first in Beaconsfield. None of the employees have contracted COVID, and I'm not just talking about the aquatics, I'm talking about public works, library, and everybody from the municipal at the city. Nobody has contracted COVID. We had a few scares because some have experienced an itchy throat, or they've been to a bar, but nothing, they right away went to get tested and everything came back negative.
It's the same for us. A few employees were tested, but no positive tests that we got. And as I said, in some aquatic facility, what we've heard is that was mostly through parties that the staff were contaminated and they needed to close the entire aquatic facility because no more lifeguards were available. But we didn't have any outbreak that implied patrons.
We've been lucky to not have any cases either with employees or with customers, although we've had a number of individuals who were not able to answer the health screening questionnaire, and that's become a challenge to manage. When an employee or a customer says they're unable to acknowledge that they aren't symptomatic or that they haven't been in contact, it's certainly become a management challenge for us to say what's the right thing to do to uphold safety, but also to care for that individual. There's aspects of, do they get paid? Do they take sick days? How long will they be off? And those are some of the challenges we're facing, but it's a longer answer than your question, so I'll go back on mute.
We haven't had any cases. We did have one interesting kind of question raised. So we do have a question in our screening about, have you been in contact with anyone with COVID-19? And if you had said, yes, we were not allowing entrance, but we had a healthcare worker ask us to amend the question to say, and if you have, were you wearing full PPE? So we have a secondary question that we ask in case that's a positive response.
Yes, I think that's definitely a good thought on that, Raphael. I know that you see all over social media kind of our essential frontline medical workers that are in that scenario, and that definitely makes a more fair way of, or a more equitable way of asking that question. So thank you. A follow-up question, I guess, pending second wave, that's kind of what we're hearing about now. Is it coming? Are we going to manage it here in Canada? Just wondering, kind of any of our presenters, what are your plans or protocols? Have you thought about it? What does that look like for your facility?
Candidates have their individual materials as much as possible, and they're not sharing equipment, and as much as possible limiting.
Well, we're hoping that there's not going to be a second wave, but this is only hope. Of course, if there's a second wave, well, we made sure that we have a few weeks available in our session, so we could stop briefly and then continue. If the second wave would imply that we be closed for more than a month, then we will need to either cancel the session or start it back in January and go back through all the phases that we have been putting in place.
Beaconsfield does have a contingency plan, and should a second wave occur, of course, we'll have to evaluate the severity of this wave, but we also won't pretend to know better than public health. We'll follow their directives and recommendations.
So we've had a lot of talks about the second wave, and kind of conversations have centered around this return to school for kids. What we've done is we've looked at it from both programming and from a financial piece. So we've done cash flow analysis on what happened if there was a second wave, how long would we last with limited revenue. So on that side, we've kind of put those pieces to help with staffing plans, etc. But then on the programming side, I think public health mandates would dictate what we offer and how we close and reopen again.
And for us, sure, we've contemplated it. We've built contingency plans. Our hope, and not naively, would be that the province would handle a second wave differently. And of course, depending on the numbers, but it would be more of a how do you react, contact trace, rapid response plan, as opposed to a complete shutdown. So that's one of our scenarios, but we have also considered a scenario where we'd have to shut down again.
Thank you. Thank you. There's been some discussion in the chat on showers, no showers. So there have been some answers in there. So just also wondering, what about the winter months? Jeff, I guess kind of look to you in Calgary. I know you guys have crazy winters out there. I mean, we do here in Ottawa, Montreal area, but just wondering, what are your thoughts, kind of what change rooms are gonna look like, showers, no showers, when we start getting snow on the ground?
Concern for us, as is our access plan. So right now our access plan has clubs, as I mentioned, coming in through the park. That'll likely have to change when the snow falls. So we're putting in place a plan, not dissimilar from T-Pass, where we have two entrances, one on the north side, one on the south side. We've closed our north entrance in a way to contact trace. We'll likely make it available only for sport groups. We're talking about the idea of putting up dry change rooms, either on the pool deck or somewhere in the facility that's easily accessible. We do have showers on deck. So I think the plan would be, and I don't fully know, to encourage people to do a quick shower on deck and then to make their way out. So provide some opportunities, but not access to the locker rooms. Part of our success has really been in decoupling individuals from groups, as I mentioned, and we'll work hard to maintain that.
I think part of the conversation too, or the planning needs to be around that people will be arriving with more clothes, more stuff, winter boots, that kind of thing. So putting in plans that to accommodate that. Right now we have personal belongings going to a small bin, which might be impossible, and the disinfecting might be harder. So certainly we're lucky because we have multiple locker rooms that we can dedicate in almost like team rooms. So we're in that planning right now to figure out how the winter weather will impact us.
Great, thank you. And I guess a final question for anyone that can answer, kind of a sensitive question of kind of come down to rental fees and rental rates, and just, you know, a question on how those have been managed at your different facilities, just keeping in mind, I guess, kind of revenue lost, but also the capability or the ability for, say, a nonprofit club or organization to be able to handle kind of an increase in fees. So just wondering how you are managing that.
I can start. So it's a real challenge and it changes often. Right now, like many of the people on the call, we're benefiting from rent relief programs, wage subsidy, and other support programs that will go away. And so for now it's manageable, but the future is uncertain, I would say, depending on the uptick in all of the units. So it's not a question I can answer on a single variable, because it depends in part on what's the traction with members, with tenants, with programs, as well as sport. So difficult to answer. As an aside, and sorry to be long-winded here, one of the real challenges we're facing is not only the lane rates, but the lane allocation. And that's a huge question, but in Alberta, because clubs can cohort, they actually have opportunities that public doesn't have. So one of the real things we're facing is when you can only swim one public member in a lane, that's not acceptable anymore to allocate a small number of lanes. So we're dealing with the balance of revenues and expenses between public and sport, and a very contrasting return to pools that present some complication. For us to provide less to public, we have to give them more lanes. For us to provide less to sport partners, we take away lanes. So if we wanted to neutralize this and say everyone is impacted equally, let's say 20% reduction, it actually means an increase in lanes to public. So there's a lot at play, Jocelyn, to say, I don't know what this looks like, because we don't know what the traction will be in all of the different business units, but we look at it daily and we forecast way too often, and then we throw them out.
I think that's a good point. And as Annie said earlier, we're all in this together. So just trying to figure out how kind of best works for everybody, as you said, across the board. Does anybody else have other thoughts on that? before closing?
The lane rates are interesting. We've frozen our lane rates. So they were to go up in September. We've frozen them to the end of the calendar year. But what we've experienced on our end is a bit of a surprise that our requests have increased during this period, and we had a couple, for instance, traditional time slots that were hard to move because other pools have not opened yet. We've had an increase in our demand, so we are completely sold out, and that's going to impact, as Jeff alluded to, a balance. That's going to impact infringing on some of the lane swim that we have allocated because it was an originally allocated club time. So what we'll find is that our club demand will increase and our ability to offer lane swim will decrease, which will, in essence, cause some concerns, I'm assuming, and some questions from the general public.
Thank you. Annie or Eric? Nope. Well, I just want to thank everybody again for attending. I hope you've definitely garnered some valuable insight or information from this. You know, we at Swimming Canada are working hard with our facilities and our clubs to get everybody back in the water and swimming again in a safer and different way. Thank you to our presenters for giving us some insight into your facilities and what you've learned and been working through and moving forward what that looks like. Again, to all our attendees, you will receive a link to the webinar of the PowerPoint presentation along with a survey for your feedback. The French translation will be available in early September, so that will be available on our website, and I believe we'll send that out as well. And then finally, we're hosting our 4th webinar in this series on how swim clubs and swim schools can work together. So please look out for that in September. Again, thank you again, everybody, from our presenters and our attendees. And we look forward to seeing everyone back on deck and in the water again soon. Thank you.